Fort Mercer Military Prison held 247 of the world's most dangerous war criminals. The guard they called the Quiet One served meals, checked cell doors, and never caused trouble. When armed insurgents breached the outer walls at 0400 hours to rescue their captured brothers, they expected terrified guards and easy targets. What they found instead was Emery Gray and the hidden arsenal she'd been maintaining for exactly this scenario. Some people guard prisoners, others guard secrets. This is the story of the night 47 hostages were taken, and one guardian decided that protocol had just become optional. Emery Gray was 28 years old and invisible to everyone at Fort Mercer Military Prison. She worked the evening shift at the maximum security facility located in the high desert of New Mexico, 47 miles from civilization, and surrounded by landscape that looked like Mars had given up halfway through construction. Fort Mercer wasn't designed for ordinary criminals. The 247 inmates confined within its reinforced concrete walls were war criminals, enemy combatants, and individuals whose capture had required international cooperation and significant resources. Some had commanded insurgent cells, others had orchestrated attacks that killed dozens. All of them had people on the outside who wanted them freed. Emery arrived 15 minutes early for every shift. Her uniform was always clean. She addressed superior officers with appropriate respect. She completed her assigned duties without complaint. The other guards had stopped noticing her months ago. She was furniture, background noise, the person who was always there but never interesting enough to remember, which was exactly how she wanted it. Tonight started like every other Tuesday. She clocked in at 1800 hours, received her duty assignment from Shift Commander Phillips, routine patrol of Cell Block C and meal distribution coordination, and moved through the facility with practiced efficiency. Cell Block C housed 63 inmates, most of them mid-level operatives from various terrorist organizations. They spoke different languages and maintained careful distance from each other within the confined social hierarchy of prison life. The only thing they had in common was that they'd all been captured by forces better trained than they were. Emery moved down the corridor, checking cell door locks with methodical precision. Most inmates ignored her. A few made comments in languages they assumed she didn't understand. She never responded. Cell 47 held Rashid Khoury, a former insurgent commander captured 18 months ago during a raid in Syria. He watched her pass with calculating eyes, tracking her movement with the attention of someone who spent his days analyzing patterns. "You are always very careful with the locks," he observed in accented English. Emery completed her check and moved to the next cell without responding. "One day something will happen that requires more than checking locks," Khoury continued. "I wonder if you will be ready." She kept walking. This was the role she played. Quiet, competent, forgettable. Nobody knew that before Fort Mercer she'd spent 4 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Nobody knew about the 18 months attached to a joint task force conducting high-risk operations in 3 different countries. Nobody knew her personnel file contained classified commendations and a discharge that came with specific instructions about maintaining a low profile. At 2100 hours, she completed her rounds and returned to the guard station. 2 other guards were present: Davis, a former Marine reading firearms magazines, and Chen, a National Guard veteran working on a crossword puzzle. "Quiet night," Davis observed without looking up. "They're all quiet until they're not," Chen replied. Emery settled into her chair and began the required paperwork. Incident reports, none. Maintenance issues, none. Everything normal, everything routine. At 2247 hours, the lights went out. Not just Cell Block C. The entire facility went dark simultaneously. Main power, backup generators, emergency lighting, everything cutting to black in the same instant. Then, emergency backup systems kicked in, bathing everything in red emergency lighting that made the concrete corridors look like the inside of a dying star. Davis grabbed his radio. "Control, this is Cell Block C. We've lost main power. Confirm status." Static answered. He tried again. "Control, respond. Cell Block C requesting status update. More static." Chen checked the backup communications panel. "Landline is dead. Backup radio isn't connecting. We're completely dark. Emery was already at the weapons locker, retrieving her sidearm and performing a function check with automatic precision. "What are you doing?" Davis asked. "Protocol says we secure the block and wait for instructions." "Protocol assumes control is operational." Emery moved to the security monitors. Most were dark, but 3 monitors connected to an older closed-circuit system still showed grainy images. One monitor showed the main entrance, or what used to be the main entrance before something had blown a hole through the reinforced doors. Smoke obscured most of the image, but she could see movement, multiple figures advancing with tactical coordination. "We're under attack," she said, her voice steady. "That's impossible," Davis protested. "This is a military prison. We've got perimeter security, response teams, all of which requires communication and power." Emery studied the monitor, counting figures. At least 12 hostiles visible, which suggested a coordinated assault with multiple entry points. "They've cut us off. We're on our own until someone realizes we're dark." "So we follow protocol," Chen insisted. "Secure the block and wait for the cavalry." Emery turned to face both guards, and something in her expression made them stop talking. The quiet prison guard had disappeared, replaced by someone else, someone whose eyes held the kind of focus that came from muscle memory forged under combat conditions. "Those aren't rioters," she said quietly. "Those are trained operators conducting a prison break. They've got maybe 30 minutes before military response realizes we're under attack. In 30 minutes, they can extract whoever they came for and disappear into the desert." "How do you know?" Davis started. "Because it's what I would do." Emery moved back to the weapons locker, entering the combination for the restricted section. "You two secure this block. I'm going to make sure they don't accomplish their objective." She pulled out a tactical vest and additional magazines. Both guards stared as she equipped herself with practiced efficiency. "Who the hell are you?" Chen asked. "Someone who's been preparing for this since I arrived." Emery secured the vest and moved toward the corridor. "Lock this section down. Don't open for anyone except me or identified military personnel." "Wait, we need orders, we need authorization." "You need someone to stop what's happening before it reaches this block." Emery's voice carried absolute certainty. "Keep these inmates secure. Everything else is mine." She disappeared into the corridor, moving through red-lit passages with tactical awareness that would have surprised anyone who'd only seen her checking locks. The facility's layout was burned into her memory. 11 months of walking these corridors, studying every angle, mentally cataloging every defensive position. She'd never explained why she spent off-duty time reviewing facility blueprints, now that preparation would prove its value. The sound reached her before visual confirmation, bootsteps on concrete, multiple operators in tactical formation. She pressed against the wall, controlling her breathing, waiting. 3 figures rounded the corner 30 feet ahead. Black tactical gear, no identifying insignia, weapons more sophisticated than prison equipment. They moved with professional discipline. Emery evaluated in split seconds. 3 targets. Unknown number of additional hostiles, limited ammunition, no backup. Every calculation suggested she should withdraw. Instead, she stepped into the corridor and fired 3 shots in 1.4 seconds. The suppressed Beretta made mechanical snapping sounds. All 3 shots found their targets with surgical precision, center mass hits that dropped all 3 operators before they could return fire. Emery moved forward, securing their weapons and checking for intelligence. No identification. Professional equipment. Communications gear suggesting coordination with other elements. She pulled a radio and listened to the traffic. Block A secured, 23 prisoners extracted, moving to secondary objective. Team 2 reports heavy resistance at command center, requesting backup. Team 3 entering Block B, light opposition, proceeding to target list. The picture was clear. This wasn't a general prison break. This was targeted extraction with specific prisoners identified as objectives. They'd done their homework and executed with military precision, but they hadn't planned for Emery Gray. She appropriated one of the fallen operator's weapons, a suppressed HK-416, and continued toward the administrative section. Radio chatter indicated their command element was trying to breach the control center. The route required passing through the facility's central hub, a large open area connecting all major sections. Under emergency lighting, it became a dangerous kill zone where multiple angles of fire converged. Emery approached carefully, using a maintenance corridor. Through a reinforced window, she saw the situation developing. 8 hostile operators had established a perimeter around the control center entrance. Inside, at least 6 facility personnel, guards and staff, were corralled in a corner, zip-tied and guarded. The others worked on breaching the reinforced door where senior staff had locked themselves. One operator was setting up a shaped charge. Another provided security. The others maintained their perimeter, professional, disciplined, well-equipped, and completely unprepared. Emery had positioned herself in an elevated maintenance access point overlooking the hub. From this position, she had clear sightlines to 6 of the 8 operators. She'd once scored expert marksman with every weapon in the Ranger inventory. That training, combined with 11 months studying every angle in this facility, gave her advantages no amount of planning could overcome. The first operator never knew what hit him. The suppressed round took him in the upper chest, dropping him instantly. Before his teammates processed what happened, Emery had shifted targets and fired again. The second went down, then the third. Now the others understood they were under attack, but couldn't identify her position. They scattered for cover, shouting warnings, trying to establish the threat location. Emery shifted position along the maintenance corridor. The operators searched the wrong angles, expecting ground-level threats. She acquired her 4th target and fired twice, one round to compromise body armor, the second finding the gap. The remaining 4 had identified her general position and were returning fire, rounds impacting reinforced glass around her. But they were shooting at where she'd been. Emery had already moved, using infrastructure to mask her position and create new angles. She emerged at a different access point, catching 2 operators as they repositioned. 2 more shots, 2 more down. The last 2 made the tactical decision to retreat toward their extraction point, calling for support and reporting their team neutralized. One made the mistake of crossing an open corridor without checking angles. Emery's shot caught him mid-stride. The final operator had better sense. He'd found solid cover and was maintaining disciplined fire, trying to pin her while calling backup. Team 2 is compromised, multiple casualties, requesting immediate support at Central Hub. Copy Team 2. What's your situation? Unknown. Single shooter, elevated position, accurate fire. We need... He never finished. Emery had flanked around to a different position and put 2 rounds through the gap between his cover and the wall. 8 operators neutralized in under 3 minutes. Emery moved down to the hub floor, quickly checking each fallen hostile, securing weapons. The hostages in the corner stared at her with expressions between terror and disbelief. She recognized most of them, guards and staff she saw daily but never connected with beyond professional courtesies. They recognized her uniform but couldn't reconcile the quiet guard with the person who'd just cleared an entire tactical team. Is anyone injured? Emery asked, her voice returning to that same calm tone she used for routine questions. Martinez, a woman who worked intake processing, found her voice first. No. We're okay. Gray, what the hell just happened? Who are you? I'm the person making sure you get home safely tonight. Emery moved to the control center door and knocked in a specific pattern, twice, 3 times, once. An emergency identification protocol she'd established months ago that nobody expected to use. This is Officer Gray. Immediate area is secure. Multiple hostile operators neutralized. I need facility-wide status. The reinforced door opened slightly. Captain Morrison, the facility's deputy commander, looked at the carnage in the hub, then at Emery standing among 8 bodies and captured weapons. Gray? Morrison's voice carried confusion and recognition. Your personnel file had significant redactions for operational security. Emery cut him off. We can discuss my background later. Right now I need to know what we're facing. Morrison made a decision and opened the door fully. Multiple breach points. Unknown number of hostiles. We've lost contact with several sections. Best estimate is 30 to 40 operators executing coordinated prisoner extraction. They've already pulled at least 23 prisoners from Block A. Military response has been notified, but ETA is 22 minutes. Then we have 22 minutes to make sure they don't extract anyone else. Emery studied the facility map on one of the monitors Control had kept operational. Their primary targets are likely high-value prisoners in Block D, the ones with significant intelligence. That's where they'll concentrate forces. We don't have enough personnel to mount a defense, Morrison protested. Most guards are trapped in their sections. The quick reaction force can't mobilize without power, and You're not mounting a defense. I am. Emery gathered weapons and ammunition from the fallen hostiles, loading herself with enough firepower for sustained engagement. You keep these people safe and maintain whatever control you can. I'm going to Block D and making sure those operators don't succeed. Morrison watched her prepare with the expression of someone whose reality had been forcibly revised. That's a suicide mission. Block D is on the other side of the facility. You'll have to fight through multiple hostile teams, probably outnumbered 10-1, with no support. Emery secured the last magazine and checked her primary weapon. Captain, I've run missions in Fallujah and Mosul with worse odds. This is just another day, except I actually know the floor plan. She moved toward the exit, then paused. One more thing. If I don't make it back, there's a storage locker in the maintenance section of Block C. Combination is 173408. Inside, you'll find enough equipment to outfit a proper defense. I've been maintaining it since I arrived, just in case. You've been stockpiling weapons in a prison? Morrison's voice climbed. That's completely against every regulation I know. Court-martial me later. Right now, if those operators reach Block D and extract their targets, you'll have international criminals loose with intelligence about ongoing operations. I'm preventing that. Emery disappeared into the corridor before Morrison could respond, moving through the facility with smooth efficiency. The route to Block D required traversing 3 major sections, all now potential contact zones. Radio chatter suggested hostile operators were consolidating around extraction objectives, pulling back from resistance areas and concentrating forces where it mattered. They were professionals with a solid plan. Unfortunately for them, so was she. Section E provided first contact. 2 operators in security patrol, checking corridors and maintaining communications. They never saw Emery until she'd engaged from an elevated position they hadn't considered. 2 shots, 2 targets down. She kept moving. Section F held 4 operators trying to breach a locked armory. They'd set up security positions covering approaches while one worked the lock. Tactically sound positioning that would stop most threats. Emery used a maintenance tunnel she'd discovered during her 3rd week, an access passage for electrical systems, narrow and uncomfortable, but offering a completely unexpected approach angle. She emerged behind their perimeter and opened fire. 4 more hostiles neutralized in seconds. She appropriated their door-breaching charge and continued toward Block D. Radio chatter was becoming frantic. The hostile operators were realizing they'd lost contact with multiple teams, that something was systematically dismantling their operation. Unknown hostile engaging throughout the facility. Multiple units non-responsive. Recommend we accelerate extraction and pull out. Negative. We complete the objective. All remaining units concentrate on Block D. Extract priority targets and move to extraction point. We can handle 1 operator. Emery smiled grimly. They thought they could handle 1 operator. They were about to learn otherwise. Block D's entrance had been breached with precision demolitions. 6 operators had established a perimeter, while 10 more inside worked on extracting specific prisoners from cells. Through smoke and emergency lighting, she could see prisoners being hauled out in zip ties, systematic extraction following a predetermined list. This was the main effort. Everything else had been supporting operations. Emery evaluated her situation. 1 operator against 16 or more hostiles. Superior numbers, strong positions, enough firepower to level a building. Any rational assessment concluded this was unwinnable. She checked her weapons, verified ammunition count, and smiled. She'd beaten worse odds in Mosul. At least here she knew the terrain. First phase was area denial. She couldn't assault directly, but she could make their perimeter untenable. Using the breaching charge from Section F, she rigged a surprise on one of their main egress routes. The explosion rocked the corridor 3 minutes later, exactly as planned. shouting and confusion from the operators, orders being barked, their formation disrupting as they tried to understand what happened. Emery used the chaos to advance through access routes they wouldn't watch, because they'd assumed all threats came from predictable angles. She emerged at a position giving her sight lines into Block D through reinforced observation windows designed for guards to monitor cell corridors. From here, she could see their entire operation. 10 operators inside extracting prisoners, 6 maintaining perimeter, 2 command elements coordinating movement, 18 targets in a confined space with limited escape routes. The observation windows were bullet-resistant, but not bulletproof. Emery's first shots shattered glass and caught 2 perimeter operators before they understood they were engaged from an impossible angle. She shifted positions immediately, knowing return fire would saturate her previous location. The hostile operators responded with disciplined fire, but shot at where she'd been. Emery had moved to a second window, engaging from a new angle, 2 more targets down. Now their commander made his critical mistake. Rather than continuing extraction and accepting casualties, he ordered forces to neutralize the threat. Operators who'd been pulling prisoners abandoned that mission to hunt for Emery, turning their planned extraction into chaotic firefight in an environment they didn't know as well as she did. Emery moved through infrastructure like a ghost, appearing at unexpected angles, engaging targets, disappearing before return fire found her. She used her knowledge of every maintenance access, every blind spot, every structural element to create advantages that training and equipment couldn't overcome. The hostile operators were skilled and well-equipped, but they were fighting on her territory against someone who'd spent 11 months preparing for this exact scenario. One by one, their numbers decreased. An operator caught in a corridor with no cover, 2 more engaged while flanking her previous position. A 3-man element that walked into an ambush she'd set using the facility's architecture as a weapon. Radio chatter devolved from professional communications to desperate status reports. "We're pinned down. Casualties mounting. Where is this shooter? Unknown position. Multiple angles of attack. Team 5 is down. Team 3 is combat ineffective. We need to abort." Finally, their commander made the only rational decision. All units abandon extraction and move to emergency extraction point. Mission is compromised. Fall back. The remaining operators, maybe 6 still combat effective, began fighting toward the exit, abandoning tactical discipline for survival. They moved with desperate speed, leaving equipment and captured prisoners just to maintain movement. Emery pursued, harrying their retreat with precision fire, forcing them to abandon everything. By the time they reached their breach point in the outer wall, they'd lost 2 more, and all extraction objectives except 3 prisoners grabbed in early phases. She reached an exterior observation point just in time to see their vehicles disappearing into desert darkness, emergency lights from approaching military response visible in the distance, sirens announcing the cavalry had finally arrived. The facility was a mess, bodies and equipment scattered throughout sections, prisoners still locked in cells but traumatized, guards and staff emerging from defensive positions trying to process what happened. Emery cleared her weapons and began the walk back to control, where Captain Morrison would have approximately 1,000 questions. She found Morrison coordinating with military response teams who'd arrived to find most work already done. He looked up as she approached, his expression between relief and anger and confusion and grudging respect. 17 hostile operators neutralized, Emery reported, her voice returning to that same calm, professional tone. 6 or 7 escaped with 3 extracted prisoners, Block D secure. No friendly casualties beyond minor injuries during initial breach. Facility is secure pending full sweep. Morrison stared at her. "Who the hell are you really, Gray?" "Someone who takes her job very seriously, sir." Emery set down appropriated weapons and began unloading tactical gear. "And someone who's probably going to need a good lawyer once you file your incident report. Your personnel file says you were regular Army. Administrative separation after unremarkable service. My file says exactly what it's supposed to say for someone whose actual record carries classification levels preventing normal disclosure." Emery met his gaze steadily. "I was a ranger, sir." 75th Regiment, then attached to a joint task force for 18 months conducting operations I'm still not authorized to discuss. I left under circumstances requiring I maintain a low profile. Fort Mercer seemed like a good place while still serving in security capacity. You've been planning for this, Morrison said slowly. The weapons cache. Your facility knowledge, the way you moved like you'd rehearsed every scenario. You knew this could happen. Fort Mercer holds high-value prisoners, sir. It was always a potential target. I wanted to make sure if someone tried, they'd regret it. Emery allowed a small smile. Tonight, they regretted it. The debriefing took 6 hours. Federal agents, military investigators, and enough brass to start a foundry descended on Fort Mercer to understand how one guard had single-handedly stopped a sophisticated prison break. They reviewed footage from every functional camera. They interviewed survivors. They examined fallen hostile operators. And slowly, the full picture of Emery Gray's actions became clear. 17 hostiles eliminated while sustaining 0 injuries. High-value prisoner extraction prevented. Facility security maintained with no backup and minimal resources. All while maintaining the same calm, professional demeanor she brought to checking locks. The final investigator, a colonel from Army CID, closed his notebook and studied Emery carefully. Your performance was extraordinary, he said quietly. It was also completely inconsistent with someone who supposedly left service at specialist rank after unremarkable duty. Your tactical knowledge, weapons proficiency, and combat decision-making suggests significantly more advanced training than your official record indicates. Emery remained silent. She'd been through enough debriefings to know when someone was fishing versus asking. I made some calls, the colonel continued. Spoke with people at JSOC who were very interested to hear about tonight. They wouldn't confirm or deny anything about your background, but they suggested your presence at Fort Mercer might not have been as random as it appeared. I needed a job, sir. Fort Mercer was hiring. Uh-huh. The colonel's expression suggested he didn't believe that. Well, regardless of how you ended up here, your actions saved lives and prevented significant intelligence compromise. You'll probably receive a commendation. You'll definitely receive scrutiny about that weapons cache you maintained in violation of approximately 40 different regulations. I understand, sir. However, the colonel leaned forward, there are people at JSOC very interested in your current situation. They think someone with your skill set might be wasted checking locks. They wanted me to ask if you'd be interested in discussing other opportunities. Emery considered the offer for exactly 3 seconds. With respect, sir, I left that life because I wanted something quieter. Tonight was an exception, not a return to normal operations. Fair enough. The colonel stood. But if you change your mind, you know how to reach the right people. Someone who can do what you did. That's rare and valuable. Seems a shame to waste it on routine prison duty. After all, investigators departed, and the facility began its slow return to normal. Emery found herself back in cell block C, checking locks with the same methodical precision she'd always employed. She passed cell 47. Rashid Khoury stood at his door, watching her with new calculations running behind his eyes. I heard what happened, he said quietly. I heard one person stop the entire operation. I heard that person was a guard we thought was just checking locks. Emery completed her inspection and moved to the next cell without responding. You were right to be so careful with the locks, Khoury continued, because you knew someday someone would try to open them, and you wanted to make sure you could stop them. She kept walking, kept checking, kept moving through her routine as if tonight had been just another Tuesday, instead of the night she'd fought off a small army and prevented a major intelligence disaster. The other guards treated her differently now. There was respect but also wariness, uncomfortable awareness that they'd been working alongside someone whose capabilities they'd completely misjudged. She'd told them there was nothing to apologize for. She'd been exactly who she appeared to be, a quiet guard who checked locks and followed protocols. The fact that she could also clear hostile operators from a prison facility was simply additional context. 3 days later, Captain Morrison called her to his office. She expected discipline regarding the unauthorized cash. Instead, he held 2 documents. "First document," he said, sliding it across his desk, "is a formal reprimand for maintaining unauthorized weapons. Goes in your file with a notation about poor judgment regarding protocols." Emery nodded, accepting without argument. "Second document," Morrison continued, "is a commendation for extraordinary action in defense of Fort Mercer. Notes that your actions prevented major security breach and saved numerous lives. Also comes with a promotion and significant pay increase." He leaned back, studying her. "I don't understand you, Gray. You deliberately violated regulations while being the single most effective security asset this facility has ever had. You're simultaneously the best and worst guard I've supervised. I prefer to think of it as comprehensive preparation, sir. That's one way to describe it." Morrison sighed. "Look, I've been doing this long enough to recognize when someone is overqualified. You're not just a guard who got lucky. You're someone with advanced training who chose a job using maybe 5% of your capabilities. Why?" Emery considered how much to share, then decided Morrison had earned honesty. "Because after 4 years of high-intensity operations in places that tried very hard to kill me, I wanted to find out what normal felt like. I wanted a job where my biggest concern was meal distribution schedules, not whether buildings had explosives rigged to door frames." Fort Mercer offered that. "Until it didn't." "Until it didn't," she agreed. "But sir, if I had to choose between a year of boring routine and one night of doing what I'm trained to do, I'd make the same choice every time. The boring routine is the reward. The crisis response is just the price." Morrison nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But word about what happened is spreading. You've got JSOC interested, federal agencies asking questions, probably half a dozen private security firms who'll offer 6 figures once they hear what you can do. How long can you keep working as a prison guard before someone makes you an offer you can't refuse?" "With respect, sir, I've already refused several offers I couldn't refuse. That's how I ended up here." Emery stood. "I appreciate the commendation and promotion, but I'd like to get back to my shift. Cell Block C needs its evening inspection." "You're really going back to checking locks after what happened?" "Someone has to make sure they're secure, sir. Especially now." Emery left Morrison's office and returned to the routine that had defined her life for 11 months. The facility had been repaired, additional security implemented, every protocol reviewed and updated. The weapons cache had been officially confiscated and logged as evidence, though Morrison had quietly suggested that once investigation concluded, similar equipment might be relocated to more accessible positions for legitimate emergency use. The inmates watched her differently now. Word had spread about the quiet guard who'd transformed when the situation demanded it. Some treated her with new respect, others with wariness. A few with calculating attention of people who understood appearances could be deceiving. She didn't change her behavior. She still checked locks with methodical precision. She still distributed meals without conversation. She still maintained the same professional distance. But now, everyone understood that the quiet exterior concealed someone who could transform from forgettable guard to combat operator in the time it took for emergency lights to activate. Emery Gray was 28 years old, and no longer quite as invisible as she'd been. But she still worked the evening shift at Fort Mercer, still checked locks with the same careful attention, still proved every night that someone trained to be exceptional at violence could choose to be unremarkable at peace. She'd stopped one prison break with precision and force. She maintained security every other night with patience and routine. Both required strength. Both required discipline. Both served a purpose. And for Emery Gray, that made all the difference. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage.